In this week's On My Shelf, I talk about 2 humor books I recently read, some social media tactics for business owners, the importance of being still, a new book launch community I set up, and the music I love listening to when writing Ferran Dale. I've mentioned before that I really enjoy reading humor books. Some of my favorite humor book writers include Irma Bombeck, Jim Gaffigan, and Dave Barry. I recently read Carol Burnett's memoir, This Time Together, which wasn't a straight-up humor book, but was more of a record of her rise to fame. She was part of a comedy troupe back before I was born, and she had a pretty fascinating life. Sometimes when comedians write their memoirs, they drop a lot of names or talk about things that sort of lose people if they're not familiar with the shows they're talking about. But even though Burnett was before my time, I found This Time Together was not hard to follow at all. It was the story of Burnett's rise into fame. She grew up with a grandmother and had a kid sister, and she launched out on her own when a wealthy friend gave her some money with the stipulation that when she made it famous, she would have to pay him back. Burnett secured her comedy gigs on her own, and it was really fascinating to hear from such a remarkable woman who made a name for herself during a time when women weren't considered all that funny. She had some great stories about people she met along the way, her family, and other comedy legends who existed around that time. One of the things I loved most about the book was that she never made fun of another colleague, but only told stories that they would have approved of, whether they were living or dead. I really respected that about her. It couldn't have been easy fighting for a place in a man's world, and Burnett did it on her own merit. At the end of the book, she had a moving tribute to her daughter, who died of cancer. So you'll laugh, and, if you're like me, you'll probably also cry a little. Another book by a comedian I recently read was Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. Not only was this a hilarious book with some great humor writing by Ansari, but it was also a fascinating read. Ansari actually teamed up with a sociologist to do research on the book, which takes a look at the dating world from our grandparents' time until now. He had stories about how people ask dates out over text, which I can't even imagine, and how they also break up over text. And this is becoming more and more common. He had stories about online dating and the different world that's opened. It was such an interesting investigation on what modern romance is like now. And let me just tell you, I'm glad I'm happily married. My boys and I are going to have some talks. I promised last week that I would share a little about my social media content creation process. I feel like social media is one of those things that can sort of take over if we're not using it intentionally. I run social media pages for 2 of my brands, my fiction and nonfiction writing, and my humor blog, Crash Test Parents. At the end of last year, I did a pretty detailed social media calendar for myself because I'd just gotten done reading Gary Vaynerchuk's Jab, 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 Right Hook, How to Tell Your Story in a Noisy Social World. The book showed me that I needed a plan in order to be more effective. I'd been posting about once a day on my social media channels, and I knew that I needed to step up my game because the algorithms on these sites kept changing, and I needed to stay visible. So I planned out a social media calendar that included some different components. For my regular writing, I included things like blog shares, poems, quote images, questions, conversations with my kids, and things that are inspiring me. The social media pages for my humor brand, Crash Test Parents, are straight-up humor pieces. I have a meme with my face on it where I post humorous parts of the parenting life. I share bits like good counsel, bad counsel, pro tips from a kid's perspective, thanks but no thanks, if I had $1, and more. I have a really good time creating all of this content, even though it takes me a couple of hours to produce. My plan includes posting on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+ 3 times a day, which I do from CoSchedule, a service I talked about in episode 21. I'm constantly evaluating my micro-content and trying to improve on it, but having a plan in place has made all the difference for me. Lately, I've been feeling a little overwhelmed with everything. We haven't been keeping up with signing our boys' school papers. I have a whole bunch of projects on my plate, that I put there myself, of course, and it just doesn't seem like there are enough hours in the day. So this week, I'm going over my schedule again, trying to figure out if there's something I can cut, something that might free up a little time to just be. We underestimate the power of just being. It's really good for us to have nothing more to do than just notice. It's not easy being a writer. Writing is one of the hardest things I've ever done, besides raising children, of course. It's a lonely pursuit. It's kind of an invisible pursuit, too, because you can get so caught up in putting words on paper that you forget to look up every once in a while and enjoy the world. I've launched a few books that took me months to write, and they haven't done as well as I hoped they would. Disappointment sent me back to the drawing board. I obsessively researched successful book launches over a variety of sources and stumbled upon this idea of a book launch community. It immediately felt like the right thing to do. A book launch community is a group of people who come together in support of an author, helping them grow their career and reach new people. Here's what this means for you. I've opened a launch community where people can get earliest access to my book releases for free. There are a few expectations, of course, but not too many. This launch community will help me successfully release my projects out into the world. Some years there will be only 1 or 2 releases. Some years will be heavier, but the good news is you only have to pick one project to help me launch in order to stay in the launch community. You choose which one, you read the books for free, and we all get to engage in the same amazing community. To find out more about my launch community, visit www.racheltolson.com/launchcommunity. Enrollment is only open until March 31st. I'm still finishing up on all the drafts and editing on my Ferran Dale series, which has been moved to a different publication date at the end of May or early June, instead of March 6, which was the original date. We had to move it back because a few of my books that launched didn't do all that well, and so I had to spend a little time adjusting and figuring out what was working and what wasn't. So anyway, I've been going back through the series and trying to perfect it as much as I possibly can. And while I'm doing that, I listen to the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. I started out listening to a Disney songs station, but I soon found out that they were a little too happy for me. This series is a little on the dark side, and so I needed something that had a few more minor songs, and more danger too. So now I turn my station to Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Ferran Dale characters are well on their way to adventure. For more about me or my books, sign up for my email newsletter, where I share an inside look at life and projects I'm working on and the current novel of the year. If you have any questions about writing or books, or how I managed to run a writing career with 6 little ones, leave them in the comments and I'll get to them in future episodes. For more on my shelf, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.